Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Just do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor of several years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
Several, yeah. This is Phil Stevens. I'm a strength coach. I'm an athlete. Powerlifting, Highland Games, much other stuff. I run Strength Guild, amongst other endeavors. So.
Hi, this is Dr. Mike T. Nelson, exercise physiologist, faculty member at the Carrick Institute, and we'll be teaching again online in a couple weeks, and I'm actually at home now.
Actually at home.
Yeah, I was in Seattle last week presenting at AHS.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
None of us are at the Olympia.
No, none of us are there.
Yeah.
Today's the big day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
As we're recording this, or was it yesterday?
I think it's right now.
I think it's now.
Yeah, that's what I thought, too.
I mean, it started yesterday, kind of.
Yeah.
But
I had a
I'm
student.
interested to hear how it goes.
Yeah. I didn't even know. I didn't realize. I had a student say, well, what do you think about the Mr. Olympia? I'm like, I don't know. I'll have to look into that.
Well, The Rock owns it now.
Does he really?
Yeah, The Rock bought it.
Really?
Bought rights to the Olympia. Yeah.
Wow. How much did he pay?
I have no clue.
I could probably look it up, but
Maybe he can do something with it.
Exactly. That's what I'm hoping.
People actually
Somebody with influence. Yeah. All right. We have a little bit of mail, like we always do. We have. I have one tidbit of news, and then, of course, we can all toss in stuff on that. The topic of the day after the break, everyone, is going to be the biopsychosocial model. So we're going to share strengths and weaknesses that we feel that we have on the biological side, psychological, and social aspects. And then we're going to talk about what we see in our clients and students, like common traits. So because almost anything is biopsychosocial, it's very broad, it's fun to sort of create the categories, even when sometimes they blur, and we'll talk about that. Okay, starting with listener mail. We were speaking about this just before we hit the record button, and I got a message through YouTube. We back up on YouTube. We don't openly, publicly, advertise our backup on YouTube. So if people listen to the podcast, or you go to IronRadio.org, that's where we back it up. Or if you want to listen through your Roku or your Xbox or something, it's just audio. It's just audio. But so I got a message that says, "Hey, Lonnie, just some feedback on the podcast." Now, brace yourself. This isn't necessarily something that all the co-hosts at Iron Radio feel necessarily, but he says, "Please don't get those Mind Pump guys on again. I didn't feel they offered anything useful. They don't seem to have any qualifications that would make them worth listening to. I found their input on the podcast to be mostly vague nothings. I feel you guys do a great job normally of keeping it to evidence-based discussion or practical discussion from proven coaches like Phil and Dan John, etc. Rather, these new age marketers with nothing to actually offer besides their personality, essentially not as helpful. Thanks if you read this, and please get Dan John on again when you can." So we got a Danny John fan here. Well, thank you, listener. The truth is, we've often talked about, sometimes there is, I think, a dichotomy between people who speak the loudest and people who actually are busy doing important shit, I guess. And not to say the Mind Pump guys don't, but we don't spend a ton of time marketing this. It's always been that sort of, if you find us, good on you, welcome to the fold kind of thing. And just sort of a way to give back in a factual, instructional way. But people have different tastes, so I almost hesitated to share that one. But it is what it is, right? Listeners are looking for factual, evidence-based content, and you don't get a ton of that, I think. And that's part of why we did Iron Radio, right? There's a lot of fitness podcasts and nutrition gurus they're just excited about things. They're more like motivational speakers, I guess, than they are direct teachers and coaches. Maybe that's all I can really say. So thanks for the feedback.
I think there's just different styles too. You know, I mean, I actually like listening to some of their podcasts. Some of the episodes, I'm like, it's a little long. You know, some of the other ones I find are interesting, but I think it's also a fine line. You can go too far on the other side, and you know, no one wants to sit here and listen to 8 studies of us reading verbatim from PubMed either. You know, you kind of want, in my opinion, something in between. You know, you want something that you enjoy listening to, but you know, you want it to be good information too.
Oh yeah, we're definitely. I always think about this pendulum that swings on Iron Radio between egghead and meathead. Yeah, and if we go too far egghead, you know, behind the scenes we'll be like, oh, we got to get a power lifter on. You know, who's interesting right now. You know, but
yeah, it would be great to get Jan Don back on again. I always love listening to him.
Yeah. Well, I've said it many times. I always think of one thing with him. He's the kind of strength coach I would want to expose my own boy to, right? He's got that kind of character-based enthusiasm, kind of. But okay. Well, here's a study. We were just talking about this.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This was sent by Daniel. He says, thought you guys might be interested in this one. The authors basically show that creatine prevents diet-induced weight gain by helping fat cells adapt to increased metabolic burden. Not sure if extra supplemental creatine would further enhance this effect, or if just minimal levels of creatine in a fat cell are required, but interesting nonetheless. If you can't get the full text, let me know. Best, Daniel. Now, let me just share this much with everybody. So this is from the journal Cell Metabolism, and it's an interesting idea, right? Because creatine is usually thought of either an ergogenic aid to boost repeat explosive performance, or even 1 rep max, or something with gains, right? Anabolic effects, cell swelling, or energy pool to support protein synthesis, stuff like that. But this is about fat. So Cell Metabolism, the author is Kazak, K-A-Z-A-K, and colleagues. The title, Genetic Depletion of Adipocyte Creatine Metabolism Inhibits Diet-Induced Thermogenesis and Drives Obesity. So it says diet-induced thermogenesis, and listeners, most of you are familiar, but usually the thermic effect of food is something like 10% of a mixed meal, right? The amount of energy that just takes to sort of process and metabolize the food that you just ate. But it says it's an important homeostatic mechanism that limits weight gain in response to times of calorie excess. We've previously demonstrated that creatine enhances energy expenditure through stimulation of mitochondrial energy turnover. So that's interesting. It says, here we have inactivated the first and rate-limiting enzyme in creatine biosynthesis. This is in mice. So they used knockout mice. So they created the genetic structure so they literally could not make this enzyme to make creatine. It says the mice were prone to diet-induced obesity due to the suppression of the elevated energy expenditure that would occur during high-calorie feeding. This is paralleled, so simultaneously, by a blunted capacity for beta-3 adrenergic receptor activation of metabolic rate. So if you're not familiar, everyone, there's different kinds of beta receptors. We typically talk about beta 1, 2, and 3 adrenergic receptors. I won't talk about alphas right now, but so things like a lot of stimulants, like, for example, ephedrine that was so popular, the whole ECA stack, and Mike and I even mentioned that just briefly a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
It would bind to all 3 of those adrenaline receptors and really stimulate your metabolic rate and kill your appetite and things like that. So there's a nice little infographic. Maybe I'll try to share on our Facebook page. It shows how creatine energetics influences essentially the adrenaline system in action in a fat cell and diet-induced thermogenesis. Again, that rise in metabolism after you eat. And again, if people aren't familiar, it's not always the case that people that are obese have uniformly slow resting metabolic rates. One of the big things that's been pointed to in the past, at least, is that they have a blunted rise in their metabolism that many of us get after a meal, especially like a big meal in this case. So it's interesting in this case where they removed the creatine system, and then by supplementing creatine back, they were able to restore that metabolic boost after a meal. I mean, why do we, in the strength sports, why do we like protein so much? It has a bigger thermic effect of food, probably on the order of about 20% compared to carbs and fats, which might be 6 or 8%, elevation after you eat. So anyway, interesting paper about how creatine is necessary, right, to keep that adrenaline system working in fat cells and getting that metabolic boost after you eat. And again, Daniel made a good point. This isn't to say that if we super saturate with creatine supplements that this will work better. Sometimes in metabolism, that could be like putting a fifth spark plug in a 4-beater car. It's just not going to do anything, sort of thing. But it is neat that creatine actually plays a role that for energy metabolism. I don't know, Dr. Nelson, you that sounds like it's up your alley too. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, not at this point, but that actually sounds like a pretty fascinating study. So yeah, I'd love to read the full version of it. It sounds pretty interesting.
I wish we could do something similar like this by putting basically, young men and women who exercise, put them on creatine. So get some, like a crossover study or something. It's hard to do crossovers with creatine, but see what supplementation does. Does it have any impact above and beyond, like he was speculating? So,
yeah. I'm trying to think of, I haven't looked at the literature on that recently, but I don't know of any human studies that have looked at that. But you would think they would have been done already, but possibly not. It'd be fascinating.
Yeah, I think something like 95% of body creatine is actually in skeletal muscle. So maybe the other 5% get. But we both know. I mean, we've seen fascinating lectures by Tarnopolsky and those guys about what it does to your nervous system. So good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, that is a spanking new paper. Thank you, Daniel. That was late August of this year. So.
Very cool.
All right, what else is happening? Any science news out of you, Mike?
Not too much. Just to kind of back up the one study you were talking about there, I was looking around and there is some other data that if you take a mouse and you knock out basically all 3 of the beta adrenergics, that they become super sensitive to caloric overload, right? Because they don't have any way of trying to upregulate metabolism if you kind of overfeed them. Yeah. And one thing I'm looking at the literature more now for a project that's coming up, I'll probably release the info in a little bit, is the whole calories in, calories out argument. And then I think it's really based on how do you adjust the gain of the system, meaning that if you overfeed someone, do they automatically and unconsciously kind of burn that off, right? And some of the classic studies from Levine on that, and you get into thrifty versus non-thrifty metabolism and a bunch of stuff. But to me, I think that's much more interesting than everybody arguing about if calories in or calories out works and just, shut up and eat less and all that kind of stuff. I don't think is that useful, where if you've got someone, and we've seen this, right, with the effect of exercise actually helps re-regulate your body's sensitivity to calories in a short version. So it's not so much that it's just burning more calories, which it does, but it's also helping kind of get you back to a healthier place, right? Because I think at the end of the day, someone who is new to all this, they don't want to put at the end goal, they want to be able to just regulate their body weight, whatever it is, with, out having to track, that they ate 5 blueberries instead of 4.
Oh, yeah. That seems to be the dietitian approach, at least in my experience. And I mean, I am one, and I don't want to paint with too broad a stroke, but yeah, really portion control. Yeah, if you're avoiding supersized stuff at McDonald's or fast food, that's actually probably a good idea, because they do entice you. For 30 cents more, you get twice as much golden French fry, So it's actually, I once read an interesting article that it's actually fiscally smart to be obese in this country, right? Because you can get twice as much junk for just a few more cents. In that case, portion control. But I've actually seen people, it was more than one experience where I've seen people just, they're served something and they'd send it back and say, cut the portion in half. And I don't know if there's a gender difference here. I tend to think there might be a little gender difference, but I don't want to sound sexist either, but there is no way myself and at least my cohort growing up in the gym, we could have survived on postage stamp sized portions of our favorite food. I'm not going to give Phil a piece of one bite of steak and say, that's what you get, buddy.
I get 2 ounces, Phil. You better enjoy that 2 ounces.
It's not going to work. That's not going to work. Okay.
Your body, that's the whole. Your body can't digest more than that. Oh no, I assure you, it can.
I assure
30
you.
grams, man, you're maxed out.
Phil, so I know you were on the road and everything, so there's probably some kind of news that was generated out of your efforts last weekend.
Besides
right?
lots of windshield time. No, I want to give a shout out to another podcast because I am busy. I'm really busy. And I never have time to listen to these things. And I had 22 hours of windshield time in 2 days.
Oh, my God.
So I just listened to Mark Bell's Powercast with him and Jim. It was great.
Nice.
I loved it. It was good. I wrote Jim. I was talking to him about it the next day. And they do a good job of doing kind of like what we're doing. I mean, it's like what we're doing, but different. It's a nice mix of there's some comedy and things like that, but mixed with some good guests. So, just a shout out to those guys. Keep doing what you're doing. I thought it was really good. It was very entertaining and some good information in there. So, and Jim was very thankful. He's like, oh, that means a lot coming from you. But because I know they're fans. Other than that, no, we went to the American Open Series 3. So I think we had 9 lifters there. 3 of them qualified for the finals.
Nice.
So that's good. We had a real good showing. I mean, we did pretty good. I think we turned some heads, and as usual, we bucked the trends in the Olympic weightlifting world. So we had people running all over the place. If you guys are not familiar with how weightlifting runs, powerlifting is kind of each flight runs like everybody takes their first lift, and it goes back to the beginning. Olympic lifting doesn't work that way. The bar only goes up. So there's many times you might be following yourself.
Follow yourself, yeah.
Or, very shortly after. Well, it's like, I don't know why, but it's become a trend in weightlifting that, people will seemingly open at, 98% of their final lift.
What?
And so you'll see somebody will open at, 90, and then it's very normal to go 92, and then 94. So they're taking, 2 kilo jumps. Mm-hmm. So our girls walk up and everybody does this. It's written in stone. So when they see your attempts, they expect, okay, so she's going to go from 60 to 62 or 63. And then, so we have Lindsay open at 60 and everybody's like, okay, I got plenty of time. And she hits her 60 and we go 75.
Oh.
And they're just like, what did she do? Why is she taking a 15 kilo jump? And that messes up the whole order that they had because basically you time your warm-ups. Mm-hmm. We're sitting there, okay, Lindsay, you're 25 out. Because we could know what to expect these people to do. And then we do that. We throw the whole order off. And coaches are running oh, crap, you're up next. We don't have 3 more attempts. So, but no, it went good. I mean, especially for Lindsay that I just talked about. It was her first time on any stage larger than a local meet. Yeah. So you're on this huge stage with this huge billboard flashing signs behind you and spotlights on you. And the weightlifting, the IWF judges that are all suit and tie, very prim and proper. Yeah. So you got these 3 eyes staring at you, and 8 judges to the side, and no, she held it together and competed really well. So, and we had several of the girls and guys that were like that, first timers, and nice. No, it's good. Ran into some people. Holly Mangold was there. She was 2012 Olympian, and stuff like that. So yeah, it was good. It was a good weekend. So
cool. Worth the drive.
That's awesome.
Sweet. Yeah. So just if I can clarify, because I haven't watched Olympic meets from backstage perspective, that kind of big jump, that could be a purposeful strategy. I mean, if your girls are just sassy, that's one thing, but that's a strategy to just disrupt everybody else, right? Get them off their game.
Well, we even did that. The thing is, you can do it all the time. In in powerlifting, you have until a certain amount of time to change your opener or change your attempt, and then it's just set in stone. Mm-hmm. In weightlifting, it is not. Mm-hmm. They can call you up and you can change your lift. So I mean, we'll even do it on openers. We don't know how she's gonna feel, so we'll call 85. And we start warming up. She's like, okay, I feel good. Okay, so we just changed the opener. going from 85 to 95.
Wow.
And then it's like, oh crap. So especially if you do that wait till the last moment thing. And then I don't know, you're a lot busier as a coach in weightlifting, because then there's things like Lindsay got placed probably in the wrong flight, so she was a lot stronger than most of the girls. So both times, like after her opener, she was following herself. So in weightlifting, you follow yourself, you get a 2-minute clock. So basically, you take this, like her second attempt was like 99.7% of what she's ever done. So it's a hard lift.
Wow, yeah.
And now you have to take your third lift in 2 minutes.
Oh.
You know, so what you do as a coach, let's say she took 100, and we want to go 105 next. So we let the bar go down. We call 102. And so the loaders set up the bar. The 2-minute clock starts after they set the bar up. So we let that run down to, say, almost a minute. We call 104. It stops the clock. They have to change the load. You know, the loaders change it, and then the clock starts up again. Okay, we're going 105. It stops again. So you can buy a little time. You're not going to get much, depending on how fast the loaders are. But so you end up buying a little time for your lifter to rest and things like that. Or yeah, you can really screw up the order if you take jumps and people are just, you can change where somebody's going pretty drastically, especially if somebody's looking at you as their benchmark. And you'll see that a lot of times. There'll be a lifter that's good, and then there'll be 2 or 3 lifters that their goal is to beat them. So that lifter jumps their opener. Oh, here we go.
Oh, yeah.
4 lifters jump their openers. Now the person that was 14 spots out is like 3 spots out.
Yeah.
So, and they're like scrambling to hit their final warm-ups because they thought they had 20 minutes left, and now they have 3.
Yeah.
So
it's like watching a race, like a horse race or a human race. There's strategy involved, like neck and neck, and then somebody tries to blow out way ahead, and other people are trying to draft behind them. It actually creates a little bit more of an organic feel there. Tension.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of drama and tension, but none of us understand. We've got some fairly high Olympic lifters, but you see a lot of bombing out at big meets, and that's why I can't understand why open at like 97%.
Yeah,
open up and get on the board. If you get a lift in, and then if you take a big jump, you probably have time to go hit another warm up.
Yeah,
you just jump ahead of 8 people. You have at least 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Go rest a couple minutes, hit something in between. Now hit your second. It makes sense to us and it works for us.
The physiologist in me, I'm thinking like 2 minutes. That's not even enough for like the ATP creatine system to reset. But you would get this like nervous system potentiation that could be lingering at that point. So it's like this trade-off between potentiation and excited nervous system versus energy systems. Everybody's got to be different psychologically too. Wow, yeah, what a.
Well, and that's where we end up having to train for that. It gets close to the meets, and it's like, okay, weightlifters. I'm not gonna lie, weightlifters they're probably lazier than powerlifters. They're like, because they do so many singles. It's like, I'm gonna take a single. Okay, we're gonna sit here and eat a donut for 5 minutes. And so we get close to the meets, and it's okay. We're gonna put you on the clock. You're gonna be lifting every minute on the minute, or every 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Things like that. Just getting them used to that,
right?
In case that happens.
Yeah.
So you would think that would be an advantage, right? Because if you're going to go in and kind of hose up their order, and that may come back on you, but if you kind of train for that, it's obviously having 5 minutes is going to be better than 2, most likely. But if you've trained for it and you know what to expect, versus some other lifter who's used to resting 5 minutes, and all of a sudden they got 2, just mentally they're like, ah!
Yeah.
And for people that have never, new lifters, there's a reason. Like Lindsay was a little upset; she missed her 3rd lift on snatch, and it was like, you got to realize, like, big lifters bomb out. Sarah Robles has like bombed out of worlds multiple times, like did not hit a lift. I was like, so you got to be pretty happy for your first time on a stage, like.
Oh yeah.
So, and it's just there is no preparing for that besides doing one. But it's just totally different. So
I would love to get Sarah on the show here,
Oh, she'd love to be on the show. I can get her on. I was just talking to her yesterday.
Mostly on you, since you know her.
But, yeah.
Like exactly what we're talking about. Like, what's it like to bomb at a lift? How do you get your head back into it? Really practical stuff from someone as incredibly strong as she is and explosive.
Yeah. Well, and even when people, like, I'm always very impressed. Somebody comes, it's always the snatch that kind of sets your meet. That's the first lift of the day. And you'll see somebody miss their first one. Okay, they're in their head a little bit, and they know, okay, I got to get this thing. And then they miss their second.
Oh.
Now I mean, that's, and usually if they do that, I see it 99% of the time, they just bomb out.
Oh.
And at that point, they're so in their head. And the snatch, it's not like you can force it. The clean and jerk, you can force it a little bit. It's not like a power lift.
Right.
Try harder. No, you were off at 18th of an inch, and it made you miss.
Right.
It's such a technical lift. Yeah. So you have to stay calm enough to be very technical under a very stressful situation, and that usually does not go well. Seeing somebody make that third after they've missed two, it's like, oh, that you pulled one out. Good job.
Yeah, heroic.
So,
yeah. You think of how much of that is just state management at that point.
Yeah.
Can you, like you said, get out of your own head, go back to what you've done. You've probably hit it in training or been really close, hundreds to thousands of times. It's like you see that in any sport, right? Whether it's a free throw in basketball, or you see it in golf a lot with people who are, putting under pressure, and some people do well and some people just fold. And yeah.
I almost wonder if there'd be some coaching technique where you could pretend, you've just missed twice. Get out there. This is your last chance. And, you don't want to program them. That's almost the opposite of, like, how Eddie Cohn will talk about only practicing successful lifts. Mm-hmm. And he's not the only one. Phil, I think you do that too. Like, that's just a good idea. Program yourself for success. But that might be a neat scenario, right? Say, I want you to really imagine that you've just missed two lifts. You know, what's the matter with you? You're going to walk away with nothing, and then try to make them be heroic and focus on the coordination that's necessary. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think I always differentiate in between a eustress and a distress, right? So eustress is more kind of like, Ed Cohn talks about, try to not go to failure, try to make all your lifts.
Right, yeah.
But I think there's a time and a place where you kind of start getting chaotic, knowing that, there's a risk you may miss it. I don't train a lot of powerlifters at all, but just a handful of people I've done for that or strongman is, and then you start realizing, okay, so you may follow yourself at one time, or you may do your opener, and I'm going to go make you sit in the corner with no music or nothing for 45 minutes. Okay, now go again.
Oh, dude, even in bodybuilding, I remember it was the Mountaineer Cup. We sat around. There was all these false starts. The show was just ran badly. Yeah. Now, the Mountaineer was a huge pro power meet. So I watched Ed Cohn squat there against these gray-haired Russian guys. Everybody's squatting around 900 pounds. Just amazing pro powerlifting event. But we were we were sort of the dessert or whatever, the sideshow. And God, yes, we sat around for like 2 hours. Imagine trying to maintain a pump backstage for 2 hours.
For 2 hours.
Oh.
It was, by the time we finally actually walked out on stage, every single competitor is like, I don't even care. Let's just finish this. Can we just finish this? It sapped everybody so badly.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, before we go to break, just a few announcements, everyone. Check out Iron Radio on Instagram. I'm trying to be better about that. So I started a little page myself. It's just Lonnie Lowry, all one word. I have our intern setting up an Iron Radio specific Instagram page, just so we could get a little bit more cross connection. I'm always talking about how we're sort of insular here, and if you find us good, and if not, to hell with you, kind of thing. Trying to change that a little.
Nice marketing, Lonnie.
Yeah, right. Well, at least the people that in the Iron Brotherhood, so to speak, or sisterhood, they're like, "Hey, I'm in." To hell with everybody else. Anyway, also, I'm just going to shout this out. Please consider budgeting in October. We're going to start our fall funds drive in October. $4 a month is we're just talking about this, right? Iron Radio is like an institution of 9 years running reliably every week. Haven't missed a week. So I think we're probably more reliable in that way than a lot of big budget production things. I mean, we have not frickin' missed a week, and we're not
gonna. We're up there with Seinfeld.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah,
Seinfeld. The Seinfeld of fitness podcasts.
Lower budget. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. But that's something that I remember Phil and I talked about early on. Like, if there's one rule, has to be consistency. That's got to be above all else, and we really do. Yeah. And people should know, Mike. you, no matter where you are in the world, you get out your microphone and your recording software, and God damn it, you're on the beach, and God knows where South American country wind kite boarding, whatever you turned out, and you still do it. So if people like that, try not to take it for granted. And so I'm not going to start the spiel now, but in October, brace yourself. $4 a month is less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees. And I think that's the truth. Okay. We'll go to break. We're going to come back. We're going to discuss biopsychosocial aspects of ourselves and the clients and students that we deal with. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everybody. We are back from the break. Thanks for hanging out. We're going to go into, like Lonnie talked about, kind of the biosocial aspects of, strengths and weaknesses. What do we see in our clients or people around us the most, maybe in ourselves, and kind of delve into that a bit. So where did you want to start this, Lonnie? I mean, with us or with other people?
Yeah, let's start with you, Phil. How about that?
Okay.
So biologically, a strength and a weakness.
I think, probably, well, I mean, you can't ignore the weakness of me just getting crushed. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. Orthopedically, I was not set up to excel from like age 7. So that's probably the biggest weakness that I had to address.
You mean getting run over, essentially?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
So I mean, yeah, exactly.
Literally getting crushed.
So literally, yeah. So that's probably the biggest. I mean, and I don't know. I mean, I think the biggest benefit or positive thing was just learning my own levers and how to lift for them. I think if you do that, you can set yourself up for success if you start to understand your own biomechanics. I think you need to do that first. I mean, just get some kind of understanding of, how you personally move, your own lever arms and things like that. And then you can start to understand, okay, this is why this is hard. This is why this is easy. This is what I need to do to address those things. This is always going to be my weakness. Like I've got stilts for legs. So squatting and things like that are always going to be a weakness. But I have this trunk that's like very short. So that's why I was always good at good mornings and things like that. So learning how to, okay, so I need to load my strengths, you know, and I think everybody talks about weak point training, and I believe in it. I think it's amazing. And I think you need to address your weaknesses, but I think you need to learn to lean on your strengths. So, okay, if I'm built like this, I should probably, you know, lean on that in competition and lean on that in how I move. So that's probably my strengths and weaknesses.
Well, one thing I notice in you biologically, Phil, is that you seem to be built to deadlift, right? So like your arm length versus torso and that sort of thing. So what was it, Danny John, that said pick something and, you know, go with that, be good at it. And your ability to run with the deadlift was partly because you're sort of born for it, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. And like Dan John was one of the people that was paramount in that success, because I remember like when I was around 700, I was also starting to take up Highland Games and things like that. And I was talking to him about it, and he just shut up for a minute and got quiet. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just keep talking. And then he's like, Phil, let's think about this. He's like, there are hundreds of okay Highland Games throwers. He said there may be a handful of people ever that have deadlifted 750 with no belt.
Yeah.
Why don't you maybe think about doing that for a while, and then you can come back and suck at Highland Games? I was like, oh, that makes sense. Okay, yeah.
Right. Sounds exactly like him.
How are you going to argue with that? You know, it's like, you know, you're good at this, chase it. You know, and that helped form my appreciation for. I've spoke about this a lot lately. People, there's something to be appreciated in people that like dedicate years to one thing.
Yeah.
Like running the 100 meters. Like there are people that spend like most of their adolescent and much of their adult life just doing that. And that's admirable, you know.
Yeah.
It takes a special kind of mentality to like, okay, we're running 100 again.
So, just hopefully a little bit faster.
Yeah, even Olympic lifting. I mean, okay, that Olympics in 8 years, I'm going to be clean and jerking and snatching for 8 years, getting good at those two things. And everything, like literally everything in their life is geared towards two lifts. So
yeah, staying motivated, right? Yeah, to get that extra half of a tenth of a second kind of thing.
It's like the big change for the day is, oh, I get to do doubles. You know, I mean, it's still the same thing. You know, it takes a special. I mean, that's the same in any field, though. I mean, like the person that really like picks a certain aspect of academia and like becomes the expert in that instead of like a more broad thing.
Oh, no doubt. Yep. Hey, I'm going to offer mine very quickly, and then we'll ask Mike about his bio issue. Only because the message is actually very similar. Biologically, I am not big. I always talk about this on the podcast. I have my knees are smaller than my wife's, and she's petite. So when I put on weight, it looks like it's muscle belly, you know. So in a way, that's an advantage for me that I was born, you know, with that sort of X frame kind of look that works in bodybuilding, and little joints make you look big. And so that was a benefit for me because I was never more than, most I ever weighed in my life was 228. And to you guys, that's nothing probably. But to me, that's at 5'9", I felt like I was wheezing and I could barely do a flight of stairs. But it felt big. But then again, that's also my weakness, right? Because little joints aren't the best at handling huge loads. And so on a strength front, I've just got to get excited about what you guys do because I don't, you know, I when I was young, I benched 330 once. I was able to do solid sets with 405 in the squat. I was proud of that. But again, to Phil's point, because I tend to be short, you know, and I'm bottom heavy. Everybody in my family is bottom heavy. So I have big legs, and squatting was fun and a little bit easier for me. But yeah, so for me, I think biologically it was small joints. It was both a blessing and a curse. But that's why I chose bodybuilding and not powerlifting. I would suck at powerlifting. So I didn't do that. So anyway, all right, Dr. Nelson, then you. What about biologically, a strength and a weakness?
Probably more on the weakness side. I would say that just some of the eye issues I've had. So for people listening, I had basically lazy eye, strabismus. So when I was a kid, I used to walk around with like a 45-degree head tilt because that would make the world even to my brain. And then I also, when I was 4.5, I had open heart surgery. So I had what's called an ASD, or atrial septal defect. My heart was the size of someone who was, 18, 19 years old when I was 4.5. So the good part was I was here in Minnesota, and at that time there was only really 3 hospitals in the U.S. that did those kind of operations on kids at the time. My mom was a nurse, so she, felt that something was really off. They did some imaging, but they said, the hole's not that big. 1978, the imaging's not really that good. And so they went in and did surgery around that time too, which was helpful. I was in the hospital for 10 days. And what's interesting now is that as I look back on it, you're like, so all those developmental things you go through from, when you're born to your early age, I kind of skipped out on those because I couldn't move. Then I'm like, catching a ball. I always thought that you're just unathletic and the ball hits you in the face. That's just what happens. So it wasn't until later in life I kind of, put some stuff together and I'm like, interesting. No wonder I had, scoliosis and all this weird structural stuff. My body's twisting around the image that it's seen. So the benefit to that, though, and for a while I went through a period of time going, this, sucks. Why did all this stuff happen to me? Blah, blah, blah. But the benefit is that it drove me to try to figure out different things, take courses on just, what happens when your eyes are kind of goofy, and how do you fix that? How do you change it? Structural stuff. Probably no surprise. I worked for a cardiovascular company in medtech for, 10 years. And for lifting, what I found was probably like 6 years ago or so, the more oddball the lift was, the better I just did just intrinsically. Like in high school, I got crushed by the bar. Squatting was horrible. First deadlift I did was in college at 95 pounds. But yet, if you put me in an asymmetric type stance, it's actually easier. And weird, it doesn't cause me a lot of pain. I remember I was training with Adam Glass one day, and similar to your Dan John comment, Phil, he's like, so wouldn't your life just be kind of better if you just, did some of the stuff you're actually just a little bit better at? I'm like, yeah. He's like, isn't it just kind of more fun? I'm like, yeah, it is. Right. It's like, why am I trying to pound the square peg in the round hole? Not that you shouldn't do some other things, but so that's why I ended up doing kind of more of the oddball Denny Stones and some other stuff like that. And what I find is just, for me, it's more fun. You have certain lifts that you just really enjoy, and I don't really care if anyone else thinks they're interesting or not, or even know what they are. But as long as you enjoy them and find some enjoyment from the process, I think that's all that matters.
It's a good lesson.
Yep.
Okay, this topic is probably too large to squeeze into one episode, honestly, but let's stick with bio quickly. Phil, what do you see biologically in your clients? Strengths or weakness, like something that's just common that you see?
I'd say now, almost everybody that walks in is like, has a weakness of their entire posterior from the back of their head to the back of their heels. As far as bio. It's every day. It's everybody. And I'd say even at this point, even people that you'd consider athletic in our day and age are that way. And it's largely due to our lifestyle. Because everybody's hooked up to a phone or the computer, and in school they're doing it now. Now they even move less in school. So
hunched over.
I'd say that is the number one thing I have to address. It's either that or just, I think they go hand in hand, but horrendous mobility. Due to that. So everybody's like internally rotated, and weak glutes, weak hamstrings, weak lumbar, weak thoracic, weak, like I said, top to bottom. So we have to address that right off the bat with everybody, and even just teaching them how to use that. Everybody's quad dominant in everything, and it's not that I want you posterior dominant. I just want it to take its fair share. So that's probably the weakness.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
I will twist this as far as a strength. Everybody's well fed. They're big. You know,
Oh.
and so that can be a good thing if you're a strength coach. I mean, especially now I'll say that now that I'm in the Midwest.
Right. I was going
Everybody
to
eats
say,
enough.
yeah.
Everybody.
Kansas.
When I was on the coast, it was like everybody was afraid to eat. So everybody was too skinny for what they're trying to do. Now that I'm here in the Midwest, it's like, oh yeah, you're fat, aren't you? So never
Big
skipped
boy.
a meal, have you? So they're usually big enough here. They got enough meat on their bones and things like that. So I mean, that can be a positive. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
So
Okay, yeah.
that'd be the one I'd think of new people coming in.
Okay. What about you, Mike? Something you see commonly with clients, a biological strength or weakness?
Yeah, I would say a weakness. I see almost the exact same thing. So I do a lot of fair-off, just one-off sessions on people, or people come into town for them, that type of thing. And just doing even basically just manual muscle testing, strength testing, or, just like watching their lifts. Pretty much everyone, and sadly it's more women than guys, are more quad dominant, although I see a lot of guys are very similar. Not much going on with glutes, hamstrings, and breathing is mostly all upper chest for the most part. So I'd say breathing mechanics and even just simply gait. And then what's interesting with that is and even some, moderately more high level lifters, I've seen the same thing. I had a female lifter a while ago who was, pulling deadlifting close to 400 pounds. And, she was, not a large person. And I watched the video and I'm like, oh, it looks like you're using mainly 2 quads and 1 erector. Get her here, test everything else. Yep, that's pretty much it. And I'd say as a positive, what I find fascinating is if you can get the body to find the more quote unquote correct pathway, since the body's always seeking efficiency, a lot of times it'll change relatively fast from a neurologic standpoint. So if you can do some stuff, whether it's, hands-on or mobility drills or whatever you prefer to do, and say get their breathing to be more efficient, a lot of times I won't have to really cue them or do a lot of stuff. You'll watch their breathing pattern just kind of automatically shift. So on the plus side, I find that most of the time, not all the time, maybe 80, 90% of the time, it's relatively easy to change from a nervous system standpoint to get the right things to work in the correct patterns. And then obviously when they load it, making sure they don't go back to some of the same cues they were using before, and making sure that they're using the correct muscles. So a lot of times I went to just not cueing them at all. So I had an online client who was here from Colorado. We had her do some deadlift stuff, and it looked pretty good, but you could tell she was a little bit more forward on the bar. So tested her, did some RPR type stuff, got all the muscles working better, and had her go back out and work up to, again, just a soft max. I didn't cue her at all. And what you could see is she actually shifted back, because now she could use her glutes and her hamstrings much better. And she's like, wow, that felt easier. And I said, what else did you feel? She's like, well, I felt it in my hamstrings. So I think just getting those muscles to work correctly, a lot of times they will then figure it out and start to use them right away because it's more efficient.
Okay. I'm going to add something very briefly for bio, because I know Phil's got to get off to work here. This is mostly in the gym. This isn't so much with students or something, but I see a lot of guys, they're interested in bodybuilding to the point that they want to compete. And some people just don't have the shape for it. Bodybuilding is a weight class sport, and if you see guys with narrow sloping shoulders or non-existent calves that insert like 2 inches below the popliteal space back there, if I was a judge, I would just be voting them harshly, even if I like them as a person. Now, I like the idea that different body shapes, you can build up your strengths and look impressive in one way or the other, sort of like Tom Platz with the legs, or Franco Columbu with his back, and and that kind of stuff. But I think a lot of guys, they're just not really, they don't have that sort of statuesque silhouette, and that's just tough. That's just a biological thing. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah.
But you know
that's
what?
just the reality of that sport. I mean, it is. You're standing on stage in your underwear and being judged. That's what's involved.
Well, and I mean, honestly, if you look at it, it's every sport.
Yeah.
Any endeavor, athletically usually has a body type that fits it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be at the elite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so assessing
you can't
yourself.
get better.
Yeah, some kind of fair baseline assessment might be good. Like
Yes.
I have little joints and I have a good shape. I'll try bodybuilding, or whatever it is.
Like I have a guy right now he's a beast. He's like he pulled 900 off the floor the other day, and he's done 800 for 5.
Oh my God!
He has 4.
5?
Yeah, on a squat with no belt.
Wow.
And he's probably listening right now, or will be. And I want to be a bodybuilder. You have 14-inch knees, Brian. Your knees are 14 inches.
Right.
You would have to be 685 pounds.
Yeah.
Lean.
Yeah.
To look like that. It's like, no, pick things up. Look at that. You just lifted. There's many top-level pro strongmen that have not deadlifted 900 without a belt.
Oh,
right.
And it's like, that's my job is like, look at people and like, oh, that's great. You have that goal. You're probably made for this,
Right.
So it's getting them to, it's not a bad idea to chase what you're built for.
Yeah.
You're going to have more success in it, which is generally going to make you happy. Because nobody wants to suck.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Did they find it was easier for him? I'm not saying he hasn't worked hard at it, that they kind of almost take it for granted a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, I guess, maybe. I mean, he's just strong.
Yeah. Oof.
All right, we're almost out of time, so I'm going to boil this down to psychosocial, and because these things kind of go together.
Mm-hmm.
So, Phil, what about yourself? Either psychological or social, a strength or a weakness of your own.
My biggest strength, I think, goes back to getting ran over as a child, and maybe it would be social too. But from an very early age, I learned how to fight for what I wanted. I mean, you're talking about a 7-year-old that's stuck in a wheelchair and bedridden for a year. And what did I want to do? I want to get out there and play with my friends. I want to ride a bike again. I want to run. And they're telling me you'll never walk. And I'm like, no, that's not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So, from an early age, I learned that fight to, okay, so I'm not built for this, but I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to figure it out. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I think you see that a lot. I've seen it a lot myself in people that have faced adversity, large amounts of adversity. They have a fight in them psychologically that is just different. And it can make up for biological, it can make up for weaknesses in your biology. Yeah. So
how about
that would be the biggest thing.
What about a negative of yourself, something that's psychological or social?
I think my biggest negative, I don't have it so much now. And maybe, I still do, but questioning what you're doing. I mean, doubting your path instead of just, okay, I'm doing it. And you see that a lot in other people too. You'll get rolling and then you start questioning what you're doing when you'd be better off just, even as far as research goes, okay, here's the plan. Let's see it through. Then assess after it's done, instead of trying to assess during. At some point, you need to make a plan and you need to execute. And then once that execution is over, now is the time to assess how it went. You see too many people; they never get a true assessment of something because they never see it through. They start changing things midstream.
Yeah, that reminds me of there's a Zen quote that says, "Just stop all your bargaining and just get with a program."
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's like, see this thing out, and then, okay, now I'm done. Now where did I go wrong? What went good? Okay, now let's make the change. You need to see each block of training out, each block of business. Of course, in business, I think, and I guess training too, there's going to be times where a fire's lit and you have to put it out. But don't change everything on a whim.
Don't throw it all out.
You need to not doubt. I mean, that's a big thing, is lose doubt and just roll. Just trust and go. That can take you a long ways. Yeah, if you believe in something, it probably works.
Yeah. So business, training, diet, all those things. The people try something for 2 weeks and they throw it out. Yeah. I mean, there's one thing to be said for like lean startups and adjusting and monitoring, but you can't throw out the whole plan every 2 frickin' weeks. You're never going to get anywhere. Mike, what about you? So psychosocial, either one, strength and weakness of your own?
Yeah, I'd say very similar. I think having a bunch of more adversity when you're younger, I think, is a good thing, although it doesn't feel like it at that time. It feels horrible. And similar to Phil, like just trying to figure out what it was I wanted to do, and then at the time I didn't realize it, but just making that happen and less concerned with the how. Like for even I did a master's in mechanical engineering, and I was not very good at math. I basically almost failed out of algebra in high school, and I didn't really know how much math was involved in engineering. Sounds really stupid.
Yeah.
And once I started taking the classes, I was like, oh, this is pretty horrible. But I'm like, well, if this is what I want to do as an end goal, then this is what I have to figure out. So I went to a private college where I did my undergrad because I knew I'd have to take a lot of math classes there. And I knew it would probably be easier, to get help. So I was in the professor's office. Every time they had office hours, I'd coerce other people into helping me. Hell, I paid some students to do their homework with them.
Wow.
Just so I could figure it out. And then the good part is that kind of teaches you that whatever it is you want to do, you can, work harder and probably succeed in that area. Then I think as you get older in life, that also can be a negative, because I know that my default habit is just drink more coffee, listen to more death metal, and just work harder. You'll just be able to figure it out. And there's a time and a place for that, and you can get pretty far doing that. But especially after my PhD, I realized that the cost of doing that for years and years on end was pretty high. And that same habit, you want to default back to that because it's effective, but yet the cost is higher, especially in the future as you continue. So now I've been trying to say, what does easy look like? I don't know if I got that from Tim Ferriss or Mike Bledsoe or one of those guys. And that it's the end result that matters, not necessarily as much the process. Right? So if a client hires me to do a program for them, they want it because that's the roadmap to get them the result. They don't really care at all if that took me 20 minutes or 5 hours to do. So my default was that if it wasn't hard when I was writing it, then it must not be a good program. And then as you get more into your skill set, you realize that it's actually flipped. The stuff that I'm pretty good at doing is not that hard for me, but has a higher value to other people then.
Yeah.
So trying to focus more on those things, the end result and what value service you're providing, not necessarily how hard I think the process was. What about for you, Lonnie?
Well, just quickly, I guess if I keep it more psychosocial, this is sort of weirdly dichotomous. I guess I'm just sort of a character in this way, but one-on-one, I feel like I'm very compassionate with people, and that can be good. If there's some way that I feel like I can help, I will bend over backwards to try to help a worthy situation. But if you notice, I just made a judgment there. The dark side of this is I'm judgmental and I am blunt sometimes. So if someone's doing something stupid, I'll be like, well, that's not logical. Don't do that. And sometimes like at work or, in the gym or something like that, I've actually had people say, Lonnie, what you're saying isn't wrong, but God, that was terse. That was so coarse. Like, don't say that. Like, so I've actually gone so far as to, if I have a trusted friend that's sort of an intermediary, I'll be like, listen, what he or she is doing is stupid. Here's why it's stupid. Can you please tell them that for me? Sugarcoat it somehow. So, yeah, there's that definite, like in Buddhist philosophy, there's like greed types, that are really attached and greedy, and then there's aversion types. I'm more of an aversion type person. If I don't like a scenario or someone's being very fake or something like that, I just avoid them. Life is too short. Get the hell away from me, and I'll dump my efforts into people that, situations that I deem are honorable in some way. But again, you can see the dark side of this. So
sure.
I try to be very compassionate, but I have to work on being too judgmental, I think. And so, like in a classroom, if a student is struggling and I see they're really trying, they will be in my office and I'll be like, we need a new strategy. Your current strategy isn't working. You're getting an F.
Yeah.
That's okay. Let's figure out a strategy. There is a way around this. There's always another way, and that kind of stuff. But Yeah, so compassion on one side, and I think, again, these are psychological and social. But I'm pretty judgmental in that sort of aversion type personality. So,
yeah, that's one thing I'm okay at, but I've noticed with students I'm not that great at, because I tend to be very, maybe similar to you, at the extremes. Like if I see someone is putting the time and effort in, I'll do whatever humanly possible to help them above and beyond whatever it is. But if I see that they just don't seem to care, it's like, it's so hard for me not to just want to check out. You know what I mean? Just be like, here you go, here's what you need to do, and trying to be more of service, I guess, to those people and figure out how, and motivation's a whole separate thing, but how do you kind of get them sort of motivated so they are interested in it, and maybe someone will just never be interested in it. So
no, it's true. And you know what? I think when I talk about like other people too, whether I think it's in fitness or in academics, one of the things that I see a lot that's sort of a psychological issue is, and I'm going to sound like an old fogey here, but this sense of entitlement that I see. A lot of people rip on millennials, and I think millennials have good things going for them in a lot of ways, but this like lack of motivation, inattentiveness. Everybody, they've grown up on cartoons about being the chosen one, and they're so special and they're special little snowflake. And at some point, that's contrary to what we've been talking about for the last hour, right? Which is pick what you're good at and pursue that with passion. You're not, you're not the chosen one. You can't sit here and blow off and be inattentive and just not value hard work. And stuff like that. So that's a psychological thing I think a lot of people need to overcome, is they need to have white hot passion for something, choose something, and throw themselves into it. Meaning in life comes from the amount of yourself that you invest in a project or a life goal. And I don't always see a lot of that. I don't know. Maybe that's generational. Maybe that's just my bias being older and curmudgeonly now. But
no, I see the same thing. There's a fair amount of students I work with who, super passionate. They're doing, really good. You can tell they're putting in the effort and generally do pretty good. I think I was telling you, I had one student, we had this long discussion at the end. He's just like, man, he's like, oh, I just really want a D out of this class. That's all I need. And in my head, I'm thinking, wow, that's your standard? I was like horrified, and I'm like, wow, that's mind-boggling, So, but that's where he was at, because in his brain, D was not an F, and he passed. Which, okay, all right.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's the whirlwind tour. I mean, my God, everything bio-psycho-social in an hour. But at least it's some insights. Hopefully, people can, apply some of that. Ask yourselves these same questions: what are my strengths biologically? Or what are my weaknesses biologically and psychologically and socially? And I think it helps to know, right? That sort of baseline assessment, and then you can progress from where you are. So, all right, we are more than out of time. So we'll see everyone next time.
See ya.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the store, so we try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org. And let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products, and we will screen them before they go in. So, thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.